Good morning, everyone, and welcome to OSSE's Restorative Justice Leadership Roundtable. My name is Dr. Siobhan Gibson, and I proudly serve as the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning at OSSE. As a former principal and practitioner, I've had the opportunity to learn from so many of you. One particular thing that I learned from Dr. Carmen White, who you may have the opportunity of engaging with later this afternoon, as she trained me in parts of restorative practices, are two powerful tenets: creating space and honoring the silence. Yesterday, our nation was shook by yet another mass school shooting. To honor the memories of the young people and the teachers of Robb Elementary, I ask that you begin our morning with me in creating space and honoring silence. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We are delighted to have you join us for what is sure to be a few hours of deep engagement, reflection, and planning for DC's teachers, leaders, and students. On behalf of the Office of the State Superintendent of Education and our partners at School Talk and Restorative DC, we welcome you. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to prioritize your own learning and reflection at this time of year, in a year which was filled with unanticipated challenges and nuances. We have planned this event intentionally late spring to give you the opportunity to consider how you will end this school year strong while looking ahead to a strong start of the next school year. We invite you to consider what rebuilding and reimagining will look like when you welcome students, staff, and their families back in the fall. I invite you, if you have not already done so, to drop your name, school, and organization and role in the chat. We would love to know who's joining us. If you have any questions during this session, we encourage you to bring them to your breakout room for further discussion after the panel, or post your questions in the discussion boards in the Whova platform to engage the whole community in conversation. You can also use the Q&A function in Whova, and the organizers will do our best to answer your questions throughout the week. We know that the past 2 years, students have faced increased social isolation, anxiety, depression, and violence in their own communities, making it even more critical that schools are prepared to meet the needs of all students equitably and inclusively. There are other facts that substantiate our current context in DC. We know that students in grades 6 through 9 account for the majority of disciplinary incidents. Additionally, disruptive and reckless behavior and fighting are still the most frequent reasons for disciplinary actions. However, just last spring, 50% of LEAs indicated that they employ some form of positive behavior system, including PBIS, restorative practices, and others. That brings us to today. Restorative justice is thought of as a preventative and responsive approach to discipline, focused on building and repairing relationships. Restorative justice is more than a response to misbehavior, though. It is intended to create an inclusive learning environment and positive school culture that supports and engages all members of the school community. Since 2008, School Talk has tackled this complex problem that impacts youth, schools, and systems that support them. School Talk's Restorative DC initiative promotes the integration of restorative justice philosophy and practices into DC school communities through professional development, trainings, workshops, targeted and whole school technical assistance, and monthly community of practice meetings. Today, you are in for a morning that is action-packed, beginning with a panel led and moderated by our State Superintendent, Dr. Christina Grant, followed by your choice of breakout sessions on a host of pertinent restorative justice topics facilitated by Restorative DC staff and partners. I want to again thank you for engaging with us this morning and wish you a great day of reflection and learning. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce the District of Columbia State Superintendent of Education, Dr. Christina Grant, and our panel of esteemed guests.
Good morning, everyone. And Dr. Gibson, thank you so much for setting the stage and bringing us into the space. I was trying to say hello to people as they were joining. And so good morning, Marlene. Good morning, Michael Bryant. Am I saying that right? Good morning, Tevin. Good morning, Molly. Feels like one of those mornings where anyone who's run a school, you just allow yourself to lean deep into your feelings. And just thank you for opening up and holding space and having a moment of silence as we start our day. I think as we, I woke up this morning and I think anyone in education, we were like, oh, getting up and going to school. And maybe we're going to hug our kids a little tighter today or look at them a little closer, but it's not lost on me that all across America, people woke up and they went back into the schoolhouse. And that is what we do. That is the work that we do. And I know that we come into this space and we may be heavier, we may be heartbroken. We send all of our love to the families and educators of UVidal. I felt like last night I called or text messaged every superintendent I know in the state of Texas, like, are you okay? What do you need? But the reality is, this violence could be prevented. And we need gun action. We need action on guns in this country. And we need to all be aligned and unapologetic about that. I remember where I was the day that Sandy Hook took place and was like, how, but still, we woke up this morning, we found ourselves gathered here today. And we're going to continue to do the work of pushing forward for our children, because I believe this work is a calling. I suspect that many of you do as well. And that's the hope and the effort that brings us here today, to get it right for our children inside the schoolhouse through something we believe in called restorative justice, while we look and hope and press forward on making sure that external forces keep our children safe as well. Because regardless of where they live or where they show up or how they got to this land that we call ours, our children deserve to be safe, healthy, happy, and whole. And so want to take a moment to ground ourselves in the conversation we're having today. I was excited about this talk last week, and now I'm even more excited because we're going to have a panel of individuals who have fierce love for children. And we're going to take some time to go into their schoolhouses, and we get an opportunity to even hear from our own students as we continue to do this work of pushing ourselves forward. And so thank you. And I'm sorry for opening the conversation this way. But let me introduce you to the folks that are going to join us on this panel. And so as I call your name, come forward or wave, let us know you're here. First, it's my joy to welcome to all of you Raymond Whedon, who's the Executive Director at Thurgood Marshall Academy Public Charter High School. Next, I'd like to introduce you all to Elizabeth Reddick. It says she is a DC resident, but she's so much more than that. She is a mother of 5 students in the DC school system, and she is a parent and board member of PAVE, which stands for Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. I learned so much from Elizabeth in the brief time of us talking last week, and cannot wait for you all to learn as well. Next, Olga Price, who is the director of the Center for Health and Healthcare in Schools. Thank you for holding space with us this morning. Deirdre Neal, Principal Neal, who is the principal of the exceptional Alice Deal Middle School, and Ana Lucia Mendoza Gonzalez, who is a 10th grade student at Columbia Heights Education Campus, otherwise affectionately known as Check. She is spending classroom time with us today, and I am grateful for her time. And last but certainly not least, Yazid Jackson, who is the Senior Restorative Justice Program Manager at School Talk, Inc. So with that, I feel like we're all here. I can see all my faces. I think we're ready to go. As I've said, our panelists really do bring together a variety of experiences. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. We are going to center that conversation on the opportunities and challenges of restorative justice, and really provide a space for us to discuss the challenges as we are rounding out this historic school year and going into what one will argue could be the next historic school year. Restorative justice practices have been linked to improving resilience in our educators and in our students. And while punitive environments, on the other hand, can be harmful to our students, their learning, their social emotional development, their academic achievement, I want to start the conversation by grounding ourselves in what we're seeing in the ground in our schools and really focusing on some of the present needs. And so with that, as Olga, as the director of the Center for Health and Healthcare in our schools, you work to make mental health services available to DC schools. What does the data show you about what DC staff and students need? And how does this relate to this overall space that we're in as we focus on academic recovery?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Grant. We know that the data has shown that a lot of worrisome trends are present. Increases in suicide ideation and attempts, in levels of depression and anxiety among youth, among a lot of us, social isolation, emotional dysregulation, and for some students, an added layer of social and environmental stress, such as parent job loss or financial stress, housing instability, food insecurity, on top of acute and chronic traumatic experiences like what was experienced both locally in Texas and nationally and internationally. And whether we're direct victims of violence, witnesses to violence, or those who experience vicarious trauma, it's contributed to maladaptive behaviors surfacing over the last few years. Because these behaviors are a form of communication, it's important to recognize that patterns we are seeing are an indication of the level of unmet youth mental health challenges across our city and our nation. But the challenges have not been isolated to any given region. They're really universal. We have all experienced a great amount of stress, unpredictability, being overwhelmed at times, as many might be even today and this morning. Particularly true of educators and those who are working with our students day to day. It's a reminder how important it is that we recognize the significance of adults and how we need to address our own stressors, not only because we need to be at our best in order to be available to others, but because of how much influence we have as role models and the power that we hold in demonstrating how to use positive coping strategies. So restorative justice allows us to practice those skills even as adults. And because learning is such a social process and requires us to feel safe, to feel calm, to have a sense of predictability and routine in order for higher order thinking to happen, therefore, mental health is essential for learning and the academic recovery we're hoping for all of our students.
Thanks. I was like, yes, all of it. And just like the need for you to be centered and calm and grounded, even as adults, as you're leading the work. I pretty transparent if you all haven't figured it out. This morning, I was very specific about my routines to make sure that I could go into a space and be a leader. And I think about that in terms of what we're training ourselves and our children about how you manage your emotions so that you can manage. Yazid, would love for you to join the conversation and share with us, when we move from the space of recovery and we're focusing on like, how do we restore all of the things that have been lost in the last couple of months and years? When we look ahead to next school year, what are some of the biggest needs that you see? You spend a lot of time in our schools with our learners, and so would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Good morning, everyone. I believe one of the biggest needs is community, bringing humanity back into education and in the forefront. And as we've seen over the past year, students and staff struggle with transitioning back to in-person learning. Adults were facing some of the same issues that the students were facing. And they begin to share community with one another in ways that were positive and some other ways that weren't so positive and or nurturing. Change is hard, and it's hard for everybody. It's hard for students, it's hard for adults, but we were all changing at the same time, which made it a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging. And particularly our community, DC community, we happen to be fighting a dual pandemic. And the dual pandemic that we're fighting is a health pandemic and also a violence pandemic. And those two things happen to have met at the school. They met at the front door with our educators, our school leaders, other students, and it made it really, really challenging. And so some of the needs are really rooting ourselves in some tier 1 practices. So as you mentioned, the routine in order for you to prepare yourself to be a leader in this space is making sure that we have very clear routines. Predictability is really key, when it comes to our students with, as a part of their learning. And so those, basic everyday classroom practices are really important. Some of the proactive supports for all students. The tier 1 is for all students, as we say a lot of the times. And so just making sure that they're available in their skill building with the adults around that. We have conversations around like marginalized students. But as we came to this year and in the last 2 years, that all of our students are actually marginalized. And so we need a whole school approach that really focuses on the needs of all of our students, because they are sharing some of these challenges that Olga mentioned prior. And so having those supports, and as we're supporting those students in the tier 1 level, is that we continuously build community intentionally. And it can't be by mistake, and it can't be by, drive-by or happenstance. It has to be intentional community building. So some of these other pieces that we want to get to later in the discussion can be seen, can be visualized, and we're now able to lift some of those words off the paper and put them into practice. And part of building that community is having that safe space for not only the students, but also for the educators to be able to come into classrooms and come into spaces that they feel safe in. And also importantly, for our students to come into spaces where they feel safe as well, not just physical safety, but also spiritual, emotional, and intellectual, and making sure that there are safe spaces there. So restorative justice framework allows for those things to take place, from the small to the big. And so in terms of needs, really building that community so some of these things can live beyond the first 3-4 weeks of school, so that they can live throughout and permeate throughout the community and engage in all stakeholders into the learning community, which will help and restore the value back in education.
Thanks. The two things that stood out to me are, one, like the safety environment that needs to exist for everyone to do this work and do it well, and then the intentionality of it. And I think lots of times in education, we will launch into something, but we will not be intentional enough or create enough time for the muscle to be built for what we are trying to do to be realized in the schools and to make it a part of natural practice. And so those two words bring me into wanting to bring our school leaders into the conversation, because they have all created the safe space and then been super intentional about the monitoring of the safe space, the building of the muscle, we're going to try it again. Oh, the circle didn't go right today, we're going to try it again tomorrow. And I would suspect each of them were very intentional about how they started their specific morning this morning. And so Yazid, again, echoing the words of Marlene in the chat, thank you for your words and your vision, because it is safety and intentionality that allow us to be here today. And safety, right? It's like psychologically safety. You have to create an environment for folks to lead and love our children this way. With that, Raymond, and then I'm going to turn to Deirdre and then Denise. So just letting you know who's on deck. Talk to me about what brought you to bring restorative justice into your school, and then talk to me about getting advice from your staff and students. Each of you have approached restorative justice in your schools in a different way, one from inception, one from transformation, and then one by like design. Would love to hear the why behind restorative justice, and then the how with respect to your staff and your students. And so again, Raymond, can you open us up on this topic right now?
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Good morning, everyone. Raymond Whedon for Thurgood Marshall Academy. So I walked into a situation where our school was already in the process of trying to figure out how to go about implementing restorative practices and restorative justice in our building. We have done, before I started, we have already did some kind of trainings with School Talk Restorative DC, and kind of think about what that means in terms of our body of work. TMA, as in many schools in the city, were a version of what a no excuse school. So we were actually trying to take on essentially our history and try to figure out how do we layer that into what we do it. I think one of the things that I'm reminded of, unfortunately, every day when I, walking in our neighborhood in Acacia or walking my neighborhood, is that schools by design have been really, really exclusive. We see that by our former students who are up and down the streets doing some great things, but many former students who are not doing great things, who do not have the tools that we have. I think what restorative justice and restorative practices is doing is actually making us think as an adult community, how can we go about doing this work differently? And actually, how can we welcome everyone into our buildings? What we have found over the last 3-4 years and working with the School Talk and Restorative DC is that a lot of this work is really about adults learning about themselves and unlearning some things that we have been programmed to do, and really rethink about why we are doing actions in support of children. And when we go about doing that, relationship building and community building that Yazid mentioned amongst the adults, and start really digging into who we are as people, great things happens in our classrooms or in our hallways, and just like how we are then interacting and like leading side by side with our young leaders in the building. There is a lot of work that we are just still in the infancy stages of, a lot of like team building, community and healing. But we also are seeing the things like circles and just being able to take time to step back before we do like this instant consequence, to dig into like what is the thing that may be being communicated by the action that has happened. And so one of the things that I would say that we are getting from our adults and our team and our students in terms of advice or just kind of words of wisdom is like carry on. One thing is that is hard is that like in the moment, making sure that we take that pause and not just to react, but to respond using that restorative lens and making sure we're doing what's best for our children and for the adults in the building whenever we can.
I think yes on everything and the pause, because I think when I reflect on some of my children, I'm always mindful that like if I had trained them enough on the pause, they could have a completely different result. Like in that second of like, how do I respond? Do I go get an adult? Do I respond myself? Do I wait? Do I breathe? And so like that pause is what resonates, listening to you. Deidre, welcome into the space.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me into the space. I will start with a moment of transparency. I had a little leader fatigue today, and I had to pause. So thank you so much. It's really invigorating to be with you guys and to talk about a subject that's really passionate and close to my heart here at Deal Middle School. I think, let me be clear about the question you want me to respond to.
Just the way that restorative justice lives and breathes at Deal, and how you have navigated the process with your staff and with your students. And thank you for your moment of vulnerability. I say often that the people who are leading the recovery are recovering, and those people are largely our principals and our system leaders. And so you take all the time and space you need, and know that you are safe and held with us here today. And if you weren't on the other side of the district, I'd come give you a hug. But just know that you're here, and thank you for showing up for us, even while you show up for all your little learners, all 1,400 of them.
All 1,400, thank you. So for us, RJ came out of our brain-based focus here, and our effort to be a trauma-informed school. Every day we begin with a morning announcement where we ask our students and staff to calm their amygdala, which is that pause, right? So they're not in fight, flight, or freeze. And so their prefrontal cortex is available to make wise decisions. And so restorative practices gave students a pathway to calming their amygdala, to finding that space for community, that space for pausing. Our goal in bringing restorative practices to our school was first self-regulation. And you mentioned that in your initial words to us. And then secondly, reflection. And then the reflection piece really ties in well with IB, because we're also IB middle year school. And then repairing the harm. It's interesting how kids think of apologies as a bad thing or a weak thing. And one thing we say here is, you're not in trouble, right? Like, but you've done this thing to our community. How are we going to repair the harm? And then reintegration, which I think, I went to DC public schools, and I think the history of suspending kids really did not consider how do you then reintegrate those students. And so those re-entry into the community once you've committed harm. So that was really important for us to have those technical steps for us to follow as we shifted from being punitive here. We knew that restorative practices could be humanizing for us, liberatory, and healing. And that's something in this large space, in pockets we were having, but we were trying to figure out a way to tie everything together. And as we've shared today, even as we reflect on yesterday's events, teachers are using community circles to talk to students as we go through the day to day. Now, how are we listening to our teachers and our students and our families? We're a very, very diverse place. I often say we're the most diverse building in the city because we also have that age diversity. And in the past couple of years, also like gender identity diversity, right? And so as we're looking at kids who come from every ward of the city, many nationalities, many places on the globe, how do we bring community? How is it okay to have a different perspective on something, but still have community? So we're still working on that piece. We're starting to have affinity groups. We have meetings with families and students to hear their voice and see how we can move forward together as community. I hope I answered your question.
You certainly did. And I just, if you're monitoring the chat, I don't know, everyone's like, calm the amygdala. And I just, I think what I'm very passionate about social emotional learning. And like one of the reasons our students aren't as grounded in the practices as they could be is we don't teach them. We don't teach children how to breathe. We don't teach them how to calm their amygdala, how they self-regulate, and all of that work. I'm also a middle school teacher and principal, and I'm obsessed with what happens to children in the middle school years. And like, those are the critical times where they get to build muscle that teaches them how to self-emote. And look, Deirdre, in the chat, you are an awesome leader. And so
good.
I feel like we should definitely do a lot of love.
Charlotte's an awesome leader. But I will end with this. Some of my high flyers will come and say, my amygdala is triggered. We need to talk. So
if some adults knew how to say that, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in today. But I will digress and keep the panel moving. I've had the pleasure of going to Denise's school. Y'all, they have chickens at Denise's school. And so we can talk about that. But when I think about restorative justice, I just remember the little boy. He was like, well, I've been raising these chickens during the pandemic, and we built the hut, and it's delightful to see children be so self-aware and so in touch with their own feelings and processes that there is an entire learning community that's built and designed around them. And so Denise, would love for you to tell us more, because this is a new school, and by design, it's built around restorative justice. And so one thing you said, Deirdre, around like what it takes for adults to apologize to children, to be inside of a school where every single day an adult is like, yep, didn't get that right. Sorry, we're gonna try again tomorrow. Hey, like, let's try this again. We may learn, we may feel like there is something in that exchange around teaching and learning where adults are also in their own journey of teaching and learning. And it's beautiful to see at Truth PCS. And so Denise, tell us more about how you designed the school around restorative justice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Grant. Good morning, everyone. Denise Edwards, principal at Sojourner Truth Montessori. We started because of our namesake, Sojourner Truth. So we had to have a space that was built on just restorative practices, but also awareness. We're an adolescent Montessori school, and one of the #1 principles is respect for the child. So with that being, just the leading force in, just Montessori practices and methods. It's, just believe that all children should be respected because they are human beings too. So just the belief of, not just like I'm the adult and you're the child, but we're both human beings and we are building a relationship, we are interacting with each other. So there is a certain level of respect that we should show and receive to one another. But respect also looks like giving students voice and not interrupting them when they are working or when they are, sharing ideas. It's allowing them to do things for themselves. It's allowing them to be themselves and show up however they show up in the space, how they learn best. Teachers do model respect for all students, as well as what peaceful conflict resolution looks like. At any given point in the day, you'll have kids who say like, I need a circle, or a staff member will say like, can we get a circle? What warmed my heart the other day was like kids decided at lunch to do their own circle at the picnic tables by the chicken coop. So you're seeing kids like taking on, just like ownership of these practices because they see the value in it. Restorative practices is a philosophy. It's a way of life, and it's not this add-on or additional curriculum. And since we are a new school, I wanted this to be the foundation. Definitely wanted to work to just disrupt the structures that are in schools that put barriers between young people and the adults that are here to care and support and educate them, and really, really focusing on building positive relationships and providing just opportunities for all members of the truth community so that we can be connected as a community, and also understand just like the impact of our actions on others within the community.
Thanks. I feel like as a former principal, you have that moment when the children are off doing the thing you trained them to do, and you're like, oh Lord, it is working. Like, and you can't even say anything because they may stop. It's just like, yes, it is working. I do want to shift to elevating some of the voices of our parents and our students, but also do want to just say to the participants, like, if you have an opportunity to visit any of these schools, you should take some time and spend. You will see systems and structures in place that redesign and reframe what's possible for teaching and learning in restorative justice. And I know that each of these leaders would love to have you spend some time with their children. Very different schools, all achieving restorative justice. And I think that's important to note as well. But Elizabeth, I highlighted you in our intro because I enjoyed learning and listening with you and from you. And so Elizabeth, would love to hear your reflections on what has been your experience with restorative justice from the parent perspective. And then Ana Lucia, want to bring you into the space as our student. Talk to us more about what this restorative justice process has been like from your perspective as one of our students. And so Elizabeth, start us off.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Okay, I'm gonna start with just very briefly what we do at home. So this is something that we practice in our home. In our household, I teach that we're responsible for our own behaviors and for our own. And we may make considerations to the circumstances that brought up those behaviors. Ultimately, we always have a choice. So just keep that in mind. So restorative justice for us has really been about creating a safe environment, and safe environments foster learning, right? So for my son, trust, safety, and communications are all interconnected. And with that in mind, that's the reason why he elopes. It's because he doesn't trust the situation, he doesn't trust the environment, he doesn't trust the person, and ultimately he doesn't feel safe. So we have to understand that trust is a continuous phenomenon. It's not a fob that just gives us full access to a person, to a situation. So what we had to do is create and school those same opportunities for success that he has at home. When he's at home and he's feeling unsafe, he has that option to elope. And so in school, we have to honor that and give him a designated area for him to elope when he does elope. So no longer focusing on trying to keep him from eloping, keeping him safe while he elopes. So when he's ready, after his elopement, he'll return back to class and talk about his feelings. But what that comes with that He's not pursued during his elopement. He just trusted to go to his space, and then he's trusted to, return back to class when he's done. So instead of suppressing his anxiety, he's acknowledging them. He's honoring his intuition, his instinctiveness, which is manifested by eloping. And then in his space, he's charged to use the tools that he's learned in therapy. So the elopement time is his regulation time. It's okay for him to rationalize his fears. It's okay for him to just sit in that space. It's okay for him to think about what's happening. Why does he feel like he's feeling? He can do deep breathing. He can cry. He can do whatever he needs to do to pass the emotion. And then once he's regulated, he's prepared to return to class with the words he needs to communicate his needs. So prior to RJ, or restorative justice, once he eloped, that was it. There was no going back. The day was pretty much done. And if anything, the behaviors would escalate into like throwing dust and all of those other things. It would escalate very quickly. And back then it was like on average, he was spending 2 or 3 hours a day at school. Like that's it. Now it's time for me to come and pick him up. But now that we've introduced these restorative practices, I haven't had to pick them up, not even one day this year for behavior.
I mean, wow. I don't know if you're monitoring the chat, but yeah, even as adults, sometimes we just need to take a walk, and we don't even call it, we don't have terms for it. You just need to take a break. And I'm really happy to hear that it's meeting his needs, and you have people taking notes. I'm sorry, I have to monitor the panel and not monitor the chat. This is why I shouldn't do this for a living. I get all in. Ana Lucia, tell us a bit more about how restorative justice plays out in your day-to-day. 10th grade year. I could spend the rest of the time just talking to you about how 10th grade is going, but would love to hear your thoughts on how restorative justice is playing out for you.
Hey everybody, I'm a sophomore at Bell. So restorative justice for me in the 10th grade, I gotta say it's a good thing because I know how to connect with people. I learned how to do mediations and stuff, and I know more about myself. Let's say I have a rough day going on, I have somebody to talk to, or I know how to deal with my emotions. And I feel like restorative justice is something that has to be implemented in every school, because back then, probably in middle school, I used to be it was just I couldn't deal with my emotions. I didn't know anything to do to deal with my emotions. So I really feel as though restorative justice can help a student just learn about themselves, how to communicate, and just learn how to deal with their emotions, and also to connect with other people and build bonds with adults.
I mean, we could stop there. It's been great talking to everyone. No, I mean, it's the intentionality. I go back to the words of Yazid that you actually have to work with students to teach them about emotions and building bonds with adults that. Olga, you took my notes that it is Ana Lucia, I would love to spend a lot of time hearing more about how you have learned how to build bonds with adults, but that part resonated with me. I'm also getting people looking at me in the room because we have 15 minutes left. And so I'm gonna try to get through all the questions because we have a lot of things to share. So really quickly, Yazid, can you quickly tell me what is one big misconception about restorative justice? And then I'm gonna quickly pivot to some of the challenges and successes we see. So Yazid, one quick misconception that people have about restorative justice.
So I'll be brief. So one misconception is that it lacks accountability. RJ lacks accountability because there aren't always visible punishment and consequences. Unfortunately, we use those terms interchangeably and they all mean very different things. To Ana Lucia's point that she just made, a part of accountability is an intrinsic process. That you begin to take responsibility, and then you now have an obligation, as you do that self-reflection. And so it lacks the punitive visible punishment, but the community and the self-reflection actually encourages and embraces accountability, which allows that individual to dive a little bit deeper into themselves to say, why did I, create this environment? Why did I harm this individual? And so one of the biggest misconceptions is accountability, but how we misuse the word accountability. And we often use it as a power dynamic versus an intrinsic internal process of emotional regulation and responsibility that comes from that self-reflection.
I mean, Izzy, can you just put that last sentence in the chat like that? An emotional introspection of self-regulation. I wish we could all be held accountable that way. Deidre, Denise, and then Raymond. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction really, really quickly. Some of the successes you've seen in implementing restorative justice, or any challenges that you have come up against, and thoughts on how you've navigated them. And so, Deidre, let's go to you first.
Got it. Very quickly, the successes have been mentioned when students come to you and say, we need a circle. When you see a kid who takes accountability, I think that's something that they lost in the 14 months they weren't with us. And so those have been some successes too. And I think challenge is still the mindset of some adults. And the comment, these kids don't have any consequences, right? And changed behavior is what we want, not consequences.
And I also think it's the generational reframing of consequences, right? So like as an adult thinking about your own educational experience, it is hard, particularly as a Black woman, to conceive of like a circle being a consequence if we have been socialized to believe that consequences must always be something negative done to you. And so just want to like uplift that part of restorative justice is a generational reframing of what socialization in public education has looked like for students. And so Denise, would love to hear your thoughts on things that have gone well or challenges that you have come up against.
Absolutely. So to Deidre's point, the word consequences already has this negative connotation. So like even shifting and changing the vocabulary that we use. So not even a consequence, but how are we responding to what took place? So it just removes the negativity that's associated with certain terms. So we have been working to build like this shared vocabulary. We start every day with community circles and just holding space. And we use that in many different ways. So as a pulse check, ways to celebrate, ways to share challenges, ways to share like if I need support and what that support looks like. Today we held space in the wake of yesterday's events in DC, Alexandria, and in Texas, but also we've been able to just address misbehaviors and also focus on strengthening relationships at the same time. And, just really having like this collaborative space for problem solving and building accountability. Time is always going to be a challenge, not having enough time to do the work because we have to acknowledge like this is hard, tough work. So just having the time and then just again being equipped to be able to support the varying needs and behaviors of students and staff as they come into the space. We're all coming with past experiences and past traumas and can just be leery about opening up. So how do we just again hold the space to be able to support those coming into it?
Yeah. Raymond, your box moved on my screen, but I was looking at you.
I'm still here.
Yeah, I was like, you didn't leave me. Go ahead.
I mean, I would say our success and challenges are really in the same bucket. And I like how we're just building on the same thing. Like, I think back to an episode that happened last Monday with 3 students who we've been working with for a while. And these students who, they were in fights earlier in the year. And now they were fuming on Monday, waiting for me to get to my office to share something that they did not like how it went. And this was actually a circle that didn't go the way that they felt the circle should have gone. And just being able to stop them, thank them for one, participating in like a longer version of a process that we've had with them for about 2 months. 2, thank them for doing this process on their own after school with the help of One Common Unity and the work that they're doing. But then 3, that they named that something was wrong and how the circle was being implemented, right? Those are the things that like young people, when we give them the vocabulary, give them the skill set and opportunities to practice it, they want to do it. And I mentioned the same thing happened yesterday with a young person who I would not have thought would be like the leader of a circle to help calm down a situation with a group of 10th graders. And so I think the more and more that we can like use the right vocabulary, the more success we're going to have and practice that. I think on the flip side, going back to this consequence response kind of like tension, I think we have been programmed by you know, many white supremacist systems that like there has to be like something that is like, you know, torturing children in order for them to really learn from it. But we have decades upon decades upon decades of actual research, unfortunately, that shows that method doesn't work. And so like we have to be in a space of realizing the long game is probably better for us, and shed some of the things that we do in our daily practice and to really start to serve children.
Yeah, thank you for naming it and then for framing. I keep seeing teenage girls standing outside your office, patiently waiting to have their needs met. And like that's, if we could get there, again, if we could get adults to patiently wait to have their needs met, we'd be in a better place. I made it to my last question. I'm very excited and proud that we did this. And it's one short sentence, and I'd love for each of you to weigh in. So every single voice will be heard. What is the advice you would have for schools or interested individuals in implementing restorative justice? Raymond, I know we just heard from you, but I would love for you to kick us off.
Yeah, I would say there's no waiting period. Go ahead and start now. I think that digging in, learning about it is the right thing to do as an adult learner or a student learner. Like people will follow if they see that it is something that like you are valuing and you want to make sure that it works.
Elizabeth.
I would say that if you want to explore RJ to include parents and caregivers, we may not know how to necessarily change the behavior, but we know how to predict it. And I think that insight is invaluable so that we can then learn how to respond to it.
Olga.
It's important to remember that restorative justice is not a curriculum or program, as was said before, that you should implement separately from other whole school approaches. It really is a framework, it's a philosophy, and it shares a lot of the same underlying principles as other trauma-informed and SEL frameworks, and it complements these other activities and interventions so they could be integrated and braided together to create kind of a safety net of supports for students, families, and the whole school community.
Deirdre.
Thank you. I would say that RJ integrates all aspects of learning. Welcome to school. The mind, the heart, the body, and even spiritual parts of our kids and our staff. It's not another thing. Sometimes people in schools are like, not another thing, but it's the connective tissue. And I would say the research-based connective tissue of that will connect what we're already trying to do for our kids.
Ana Lucia.
I would encourage the school to allow students and adults to work together so it don't be one-sided, and to try to have restorative circles.
Denise.
So the underlying premise of restorative practice is, for human beings to become more engaged, more collaborative, more productive, and that'll allow us to more likely change behaviors to have a positive impact. And, for just me as a school leader, just doing things with folks as opposed to them, or for them. So definitely try it.
And Yazid, I purposely saved you for the end. And so every time I'm in your presence, I leave with like notes and I'm just so full. So would love for you to give us your thoughts on implementing restorative justice.
One, be patient, give yourself grace, slow is fast, and continue to date the concepts and the philosophy. And by dating, you're constantly and intentionally exploring with the anticipation of learning and or unlearning. So, continue to date the practice, slow is fast, be patient, give yourself grace through the process. Nothing in this world is perfect, but just keep attacking it and allow it to breathe in your building outside of the words on your mission and vision statement.
See, I mean, I think the thing that resonated for me is that it's very much a marathon. It is like not a sprint. And the investments you will make in a child in 3rd grade will pay off for that child in 9th grade. And I think that's the part that I think we miss. And so I want to uplift Elizabeth in that, like, it has to be done in partnership with parents and guardians. Parents are the first teacher, and we just get the privilege of loving their little learners when they're not at home. And so all of this is a mindset, it's a framework, it's a way of thinking and being, it's an authentic way of loving children. And I don't think we talk about the space that love plays for our children and how we actually have to love ourselves enough to break ourselves open and come up with new ways to show up in our classrooms. They have these really lovely words that I'm supposed to read to close us out, but I want, in the spirit of the time we've had, I want to say a lot of rounds of thank yous to our principals. It is not lost on me that you woke up this morning and had to go lead in the face of a lot. Internal adversity, feelings, emotions, your kids. You have to look your parents in the face and say, like, yep, it's safe, drop them off, we gonna be all right. And so I just want to thank you all for finding the space to hold time with us today and keep us grounded in this work of restorative justice. To Yazid, Olga, Elizabeth, thank you for coming and bringing your full self into the space. And really, this panel could have lasted for 3 hours. If you all had seen the first set of questions, you would have known it could have lasted for 3 hours, but you bring a wealth of expertise into the space that I hope, as we spend time today in sessions, you all continue to amplify your work, your thoughts, your voices, your perspectives, and that the 101 people who are still with us have an opportunity to reach and speak with you. And Ana Lucia, we're doing all of this work in service of you. I hope you grow to take all of our jobs one day, and that you are unapologetic in your school community at Czech and throughout Washington, D.C. about the importance. The one thing you said a lot, but the one thing that we must disrupt is the relationship between children and adults in schools. It must be a fluid exchange of knowledge. We have positional power and we're older and we've lived a lot, but there is so much that you teach us every day. And so thank you for taking time out of class to be here and share with us. And then I just want to thank Dr. Siobhan Gibson, who's been silent in the chat, and all of the folks who've put the panel together today. You know, I think we plan things and we come into spaces. It's just not lost on me that today was a special day, moment, and opportunity to talk about loving our children. I'm grateful that the team at OSSI even thought to ask me to hold this panel. It is restoring me today when I think we all needed a moment of restoration. And I hope that we gave you all a moment of reflection and restoration. And as we close out the day, you know, look to our children and look to our educators and just make sure that folks are well and that you have checked on them to make sure that they are well. Until we have time together again, I am grateful that we had this moment this morning.